the intent behind those words are for your people to be inspired, right? So when a person walks into their organization, they look up and they say, those are my words to live by, right? That's my corporate mantra. That's my personal mantra. But if those words aren't lived daily, and if they're not heard daily, then they're just empty words, right? They're just they're literally just wallpaper. Appreciate the opportunity. Happy to be here. I think I guess, and I'm glad we got to see Steve there for a second. I'd like to say, I guess, thanks to Steve Johns, I wouldn't probably be here in front of you or have met you if it wasn't for Steve and the Heartland Heroes and the opportunity to get to speak with you all. Hopefully, everybody's quarantine and COVID-19 experience has been good and safe. If you're anything like me, it's been pretty basic. You know, I think I gained similar to the freshman 15, the COVID-19, then lost it. Become a walker. I never thought I'd be a walker. Got a dog. A lot of the things that I didn't think I'd be doing just 3 or 4 months ago, but I think extreme boredom and quarantine leads to odd decisions. Anyways, Randy, did you want me to discuss how we got here or my background? How do we want to proceed here?
Sure. Yeah, I think just a little bit of your journey of from ROTC to military to officer and things you learned along the way and how you formed your leadership and culture lessons that you've shared
Sure.
before.
Well, I'll start off by saying that talking about myself is probably my least favorite thing to do, but I'll give it a go here. I'm an Army brat. I'm a son of a West Point infantry officer who's the son of an officer in the Army as well, and goes back 3 or 4 generations. I think servitude, the opportunity to lead in the military is something that's in my family's DNA. So whenever I went to college, which was University of Kansas, I joined ROTC. And actually, I will say I'm a failed West Point applicant. Bob Dole and Nancy Castlebaum didn't see me fit to go to the academy, which is fine. I don't hold any grudges. But went through ROTC, was branched into the infantry in 1998. I was very, very, very fortunate, as Drew on this call would know, when I graduated Ranger School. I think about 400 of us-ish started and around 80 of us graduated. And all of the other officers, most of them were West Pointers who had orders for Italy up in the Alps, unfortunately had not made it through the school. And I was the only officer with orders for Europe. And the branch manager asked if I wanted to be stationed up in the Alps. And I said, yeah, yes, sir. So I got very lucky. My first duty assignment was up in Italy. In an airborne unit, was with the LURS in Germany. It's a long-range surveillance organization. Did some tours in the Balkans. Got an opportunity to command at Fort Hood, Texas, with the 1st Cavalry Division. And that took me to Iraq, where I commanded March 04 to March 05. And then left the service in 06. Had the wonderful opportunity, a gentleman named Chandler Culler recruited me over to, it was called Crutcher Lynch at the time, which was an insurance brokerage, then became Crutcher Heartland, then Truss, and now it's Hub Kansas City. And so that's kind of my journey in terms of how I got to the seat in front of you. Again, Drew could probably teach this class, but you know, we had an opportunity, I don't know, Randy, if it was maybe 4 or 5 months ago or maybe longer than that, to sit down and discuss some of the leadership challenges that our organization has faced. And I think some of the comments that I made inspired you to want to have this call today. You know, I'm very fortunate in that both my time in the service and my time in corporate America has allowed me really to understand how leadership lessons kind of can correlate from the military into corporate America. The opportunity to share that with the folks here today is wonderful. The biggest thing about leadership that people, I'd say the biggest misnomer that people have about leadership is they think it's an individual responsibility, or in some cases, some people feel like it's an individual burden. And, you know, leadership, frankly, is a culture. It's a culture, it's a mentality that you have in an organization. The lowest ranking person in your company has the right and the opportunity, given the correct mentorship and development, to be a leader. And so it's more of a culture than it is a responsibility. And every person on this call is most likely a leader, or they probably wouldn't have been recruited or invited to be on here. So the difference between, I think, my professional upbringing and perhaps yours is that a lot of these words that revolve around, or phrases that revolve around leadership, have always been coined into certain phrases that are mantras, you know, that we would live by, that we would experience on a daily basis in the service, and we do here in corporate America. Is we just don't know by these terms. You know, in the intro, Randy's invite, Leaders Eat Last was something that stuck with him. And Leaders Eat Last was just one of many things that I'm going to discuss here over the next couple, 20, 25 minutes. But when you walk into organizations, you know, they'll have their mission statement on the back wall. They might have their corporate values listed somewhere, their principles of whatever. The intent behind those words are for your people to be inspired, right? So when a person walks into their organization, they look up and they say, those are my words to live by, right? That's my corporate mantra. That's my personal mantra. But if those words aren't lived daily, and if they're not heard daily, then they're just empty words, right? They're just they're literally just wallpaper at that point. And so during the presentation that we had with Steve and Randy and some of his Heartland Heroes folks, was me just putting these into words. And the first one from a leadership culture standpoint is, it's very simple. We've all heard it before, but lead by example, right? Lead by example is something that you hear on a daily basis when you're walking the sidewalks in garrison and in the Army. You know, lead by example is a very simple mantra that you should have on a daily basis. And that's when you walk in the door. That's your attitude. You know, how are you coming off to other individuals? Are you positive? Are you negative? You know, a leader is supposed to be a steady, even-keeled individual that people can depend on. People can depend on their attitude. They can depend on their advice, their opinion. In addition to attitude, your morale. You know, how do you bring it each day? Are you a giver or are you a taker? You know, as a leader, if you want a culture of high morale, it starts with how you behave. It only takes an organization 8 to 12 months to modify their behavior to mirror or emulate that of their leader. That's doctrinal. So as a leader, if you feel like you're not already at a positive attitude, high morale, these are things that you could work on, could be better at. If you choose to become better at it, it's only going to take a small amount of time, 8 to 12 months, before the people around you that you work with begin to adopt that same attitude and that same morale. You know, your behavior in the office is also leading by example. Is your door open or is it closed? You know, that's a big characteristic for people to understand about you. If your door is open, that's a metaphor for how you treat others. You're open to them coming in and talking to you. There's times, I get it, where the door needs to be closed. That's no problem. But, you know, that's the small things that you got to pay attention to. You know, are you a heat shield or are you a heat conductor? Whenever bad things occur, as a leader, your responsibility is not to turn around and conduct that heat onto your peers or your subordinates. Your responsibility is to first understand is, how did I fail? And when I failed, how can I fix that in the future? A lot of leaders, at least new leaders, seasoned leaders understand this concept, but new leaders they feel like they have the potential to lose that job quickly, as quickly as they got it, or they're not confident in their skill set. And that confidence, or the lack thereof, turns people sometime into heat conductors versus heat shields. So that's something you need to pay attention to. It's something you need to pay attention to when you're counseling or developing your peers or your subordinates, or even, when you're talking with your boss. Another cultural mantra within leadership is the harder right over the easy wrong. We're all humans. We all make errors. The great news is every day you wake up, you have another opportunity to be a better person. Harder right over the easier wrong. When you're walking down the hallway and you see literally a stapler discarded on the floor, a little piece of trash over here, pick it up. It's nothing, but it's something, right? Because as a leader, everybody's always watching you. You can tell, but the harder right over the easy wrong is don't step over it. Just bend over and pick it up. That's a small, tiny example. In the military, there was a thing where you couldn't walk through the grass in garrison. And every Tuesday we would have command and staff meetings, and I could look out my back door of my company headquarters and I saw the battalion headquarters. It was literally 50 yards across a grass field. However, the right thing to do, which I did every time, was to go out the front door, walk around all the sidewalks, go around the block, and come back in through the battalion headquarters. The right thing to do was to walk a couple 100 yards versus 50 yards, and that's leading by example. That's doing the right thing, and it's the harder right over the easier wrong. It's a simple thing, but it's a big thing if you really, really think about it. Leaders eat last is one of the first things I learned. I learned it from my father. I learned it from my NCOs that I was responsible for, and I've learned it from leaders here in corporate America. But it's a mentality. It's not just a word, right? Leaders eat last, if you put it in a corporate America terminology, it's a mentality of appreciating and celebrating your folks before you've had the opportunity to appreciate or celebrate anything you've accomplished. It's making sure that you're celebrating wins on behalf of them, not necessarily because of your leadership or how you facilitated it. On mission, I remember in Iraq many times, we were one of the first FOBs, Fire Operations Base, that were located in downtown Baghdad. Most everybody was located in BIOP, which is the large airport, Baghdad International Airport, massive compound, or the Green Zone. But we had this one little battalion of about 800 soldiers, manning our own gates, staffing our own walls, and really being insulated from everybody else. And many times our supply trains were attacked, whether with IEDs or VBIEDs or various ambushes along the way. And so our food on certain days just didn't come. And so we would rely on lunch to be served at dinner, the leftovers. Well, it's a small thing, but those individuals that work with you or for you or however you see them, for me, I work with and I work for these individuals. My responsibility was to make sure they're fed first. And once everybody went through the chow line, there were several times when I just had a couple pieces of corn or some green peas left over, which I hate, but that was all that was left over. And that's just a small vignette, but what it really means is there's a mentality that as a leader, you got to be selfless and you put your people first. And you got to have the mentality that you work for those individuals, not they work for you. And that's why leaders eat last. But culturally, when your people know that that's how you feel and that's how you approach their role in your life, the appreciation is reciprocated. I'll just tell you that. Another cultural mantra with leadership is repetition is the mother of all learning. The hardest thing to do when you're training on anything, whether it's golf or fitness or marksmanship or sales, is doing it over and over and over and over and over and over. doing it again and again, validating over and over. The concept behind repetition is the mother of all learning is so that the muscle memory is deep within your person, so that whenever the bullets are flying or the deal is going down over the table, you're not having to think about some of the fundamental sales skills, like shut up and listen, or uncomfortable pauses or uncomfortable silence, allowing other people to speak. Those things are already muscle memory. You don't have to think about those. What you can be doing in the moment is thinking psychologically about the next step. So repetition as the mother of all learning is a cultural thing that you should have in your daily repertoire, from anything from fitness to whatever. Tough love is another hypercritical leadership concept that you must have in your daily regimen of how you think. I see tough love in corporate America with quarterly development counseling. I do vision meetings with our producers, and our unit leaders are now doing, and our mid-level management are doing developmental counseling sessions with our folks. Tough love isn't celebrating over and over and pouring over on how well somebody does, and that's great, but everybody always has the room to improve. So once a quarter at least, you should be taking the time to be providing what I would call developmental counseling that is constructive in nature and never deconstructive. The format for good developmental counseling when you're giving tough love is you always start with a positive, always. You always say, hey, I understand when you said your 3 strengths and your 3 weaknesses coming into this meeting were that you feel you are a great teammate, that you have a great attitude, and that you're able to delegate. And I agree with you. I agree with all of those points. But we're not here today to discuss how great you are. We're here to discuss how we can become greater. And so in that vein, here's what we want to discuss. And here are the things I think that you can improve upon to become even better. Developmental counseling, tough love, etc. Again, it's always constructive. It's never deconstructive. The quickest way for somebody in front of you when you're providing feedback, for them to turn that off switch off and start having that personal voice that says, I'm not listening to this person. This person doesn't know what they're talking about. I don't respect this person, is to come in heavy with just brutal, deconstructive criticism. So tough love is an area that I think in corporate America, a lot of us have the room to improve. Another cultural mantra within leadership is comparison is the root of all jealousy. Essentially what this means is stay in your lane. You can't look left and right. You got to have blinders on. It doesn't matter from your neighbors to your good buddies to your peers in the industry to your own coworkers. Stay in your lane. Focus on what your responsibilities are. Do everything you can at the highest level. If you start looking left and right, swimming is a great metaphor for this. When your little kids are going through swim events, at least my daughter and my son went through those. Anytime a kid starts popping their head up and looking left or right, their stride slows down, right? And then they start getting in their own head about, how am I doing? I'm not doing very well. I got to speed up. Then they burn themselves out because they gassed out early because they compared. You can't compare yourself and your journey to anybody else. And so, again, these are words we all know, we all understand it. But if you put them into simple cultural mantras, they stay with you, and I think they help you along the way. Do the right thing when no one is looking. Similar to hard or right over the easy wrong, they're almost synonymous. Doing the right thing when no one is looking. It's as simple as, when I was going through when I'm trying to lean up and lose weight, and you're walking around the office and there's donuts in the break room, and you so badly want to bite one of those chocolate glazed Krispy Kremes. What's the right thing when no one is looking, right? No one's there. No one's going to know, but you're going to know. That small display of discipline, that tiny little bit of display of discipline to yourself, is a confidence booster. And it's those little building blocks that you need along the way that create a monster, a highly disciplined, Drew Meyerowitz, 220 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal kind of person, right? So doing the right thing, even when no one is looking, is a cultural mantra that I think people should have. Expense accounts. People, when they're out on a business meeting and they're actually having a happy hour by themselves. I've been in this position. I'm on a business trip. It's a happy hour. I could totally expense this for under Wichita anesthesiology. But that's, no one is looking. The right thing to do is to just pay for it on your own and be a good steward of corporate expenses, right? I'm just trying to give little vignettes here. I hope that makes sense, Randy. Something that people when they get a little longer in the tooth, myself included, fail to do is you have to make yourself uncomfortable as often as possible. And what does that mean? Once you start getting sedentary, and I don't mean physically, but mentally, you start getting into a routine, and sometimes behavioral routines, and especially behavioral routines that you're not a fan of, they're the hardest things to break. And so making yourself uncomfortable, I'll give you a great example. Going through basic, when the drill sergeant comes out and he says, I need a volunteer, whatever it's going to be work. I might have to go to the kitchen and clean up plates. I might have to go empty trash out of dumpsters. I might have to go clean a dumpster. I might have to do something gross, bad, or it could be fun. You have no idea. But when he comes out and says, I need a volunteer, you better be the first to raise your hand. Not knowing what it is, but what you're displaying is leadership by example. Harder right over easy wrong. The repetition of always just knowing I'm a volunteer, I'm going to do this, I'm going to lead by example. Doing the right thing when no one is looking. These are all part of that fabric. And so that's an example, but educating yourself, putting yourself out there, reading more books, fitness, sign up for a triathlon, sign up for a marathon, make yourself uncomfortable. There's growth. There's individual mental cognitive growth that occurs when you put yourself in positions of greater responsibility that you weren't even wanting to participate in, whether it's being on a board, accepting a job position increase, whatever. And then I think I'll finish up here, Randy, with the last one, which is leadership is a lonely profession. In the military, fraternization is illegal. You may call your subordinates by their first name, but they don't call you by your first name. But the reason leadership is a lonely profession is the following. You're going to have to make tough decisions, whether in corporate America or sending folks into the breach. And when you have to make tough decisions, if you're too friendly with your folks, it's going to be tough for you unless you're trained. It's going to be tough for you to put people in a tough position as well, putting them outside their comfort zone. Better developmental counseling. If you're too much of a friend, you can't have these tough conversations with folks. And so the mantra of leadership as a lonely profession doesn't mean that you can't, befriend coworkers. What it means is you got to keep a little bit of a professional distance so that you have the confidence in yourself to be able to have tough conversations when you need to, and you're not too overly friendly where somebody's going to take it personal and make you feel bad. Because sometimes as a leader, you have to have tough conversations. So, with that being said, I'm happy to discuss some of these cultural, leadership mantras and go from there, Randy.
Awesome. Well, if you have questions, type it in the chat and I will unmute you. I wanted to start with one just about decision making, and I think we probably all encountered folks in business who are very indecisive. They don't have all the information they would like, but I'm sure you found yourself in situations on the streets of Baghdad where you had to make tough decisions fast and being paralyzed and indecisive wasn't an option. Yeah, how do you prepare yourself for the decision-making process when not everything you'd like to know is at hand?
Yeah, decisiveness is an incredibly positive trait to have as a leader, right? But also with decisiveness, you can pair that with humility. And humility in the form of, I made a wrong decision, let's pivot from here and go a different direction. Typically, going into a mission, it wasn't necessarily Chris Ford's plan or Captain Ford's plan. Going into a mission, once I'd received the mission from higher, I would always include my senior leadership, my first sergeant, my platoon sergeants, my lieutenants. And I'd want to understand everybody's perspective. What are our danger areas? What do we think the enemy's situation, task organization looks like? What are we planning for here? Once you have everybody's buy-in, the most important thing to do from there was always create a second course of action, a third course of action, what we call branches and sequels to the plan. So decisiveness doesn't mean that we're going with my plan and that's it. Decisiveness is, folks, plan A isn't working, we're going to plan B. Plan B is not working, we're going to plan C. Being decisive about executing decisions that collectively you've come up with. If you have the opportunity to make important decisions with a collective, with your peers, with your subordinates, getting buy-in collectively, and then creating a course of action 2, a course of action 3, a most dangerous, a most probable, a least likely, but having multiple branches and sequels that you can go down. Decisiveness can manifest itself in the form of just simply switching from plan A to plan B. And so typically when we would go on to a mission and the you-know-what hits the fan, and you got a sniper on the water tower that you weren't anticipating, and it wasn't in plan A or even plan B, hopefully it was considered in plan C or D. And so everybody's rehearsed enough to know that we need to go left or right or up or down or what have you.
Along the way, as you developed these leadership and culture concepts and cemented them, were there positive leaders you had along the way that had a positive influence? And then on the flip side, without calling people out, were there negative behaviors you saw that you thought created bad cultures?
Hey, everybody on this call can appreciate what I'm about to say, but you learn more from poor leaders than you ever will from great leaders. I was very, very, very fortunate during my time, at least in the service and in corporate America for that matter, with leadership. Francis Kearney, who commanded the 75th Ranger Regiment, was my first brigade commander. If anybody's familiar with the battalion I was a part of in Italy, unfortunately at the time there was only one battalion under one brigade, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But Colonel Kearney was walking around very, very often, and so you couldn't avoid him. I remember running into him on a Saturday morning. No, it was a Sunday morning in the little gas station there, in the PX, and he walks up to me. I'd only been there for about a month, and he says, "Lieutenant Ford." I said, "Yes, sir." And I actually tried to avoid him. I was walking down aisles to get away from this guy, and he said, "I need to talk to you." And so he took me outside the PX, and he looked at my face kind of to the left and to the right, and he said, "Did you shave this morning?" I said, "No, sir." And he said, "You're an officer in this man's army, and you're supposed to lead by example on a daily basis. If you're going to come on this compound, essentially, you better lead by example and have a clean-shaven face before you come in here, and I don't care what day it is." I said, "Yes, sir." That's a tiny thing from a real operator, warfighter. Colonel Yarborough commanded 3rd Ranger Battalion. Colonel Kershaw, he commanded Ranger Battalion. He commanded in SOCOM. All of my first leaders that I came across were unbelievable mentors that taught me taught me so many things. Peer reviews, peer evaluations, selflessness, humility to ask any question, no matter how dumb you think it is. That's great leadership. All that being said, I learned more from the poor leaders about how not to treat individuals, how not to take credit for things that you should never take credit for, how not to do a developmental counseling session, how to, so many lessons learned from those folks. But I would tell you that, the opportunity, don't discount being around folks that you don't respect, because there's so many opportunities to learn. It might take a while for you to appreciate what you went through, but in the moment, just take a second to pause and exhale and appreciate the fact that you're actually learning, and you're never not learning.
Awesome. Aaron, I unmuted you, but I think Aaron's going to give you some tough love and also a comment.
Sure.
Yes. So first I have a question. The last time we were on something, I asked you to be my connection on LinkedIn, and it's still pending. So I'm just wondering why that's happening.
You know what? I was coached by a gentleman named Scott Havens that if you haven't met somebody, or you don't know them from a networking session, etc., or they're not directly in your professional lane, that hold off on that until you get the opportunity. So right. Aaron, I apologize that you might be in the queue, and immediately following this, I'm taking the note, right? We will be connected on LinkedIn.
So speaking of Scott Havens, I've heard of him. We have a show together every Tuesday. So I told him that I was watching one of his people, and he wanted me to tell you this. First, he says you're a badass and that you are his idol and the best business mind in Kansas City. So I suggested that to get out of his comfort zone, he signs up for a triathlon, and that you were going to help him with that.
Oh, what you're saying is that I would be signing up for a triathlon in order to help him if I take that to the next step. I'd be happy to help one time Scott Havens do a triathlon. He tough love, professional criticism or personal criticism. I think he could use it.
He's incredibly complimentary of you. I just wanted you to know that.
I love Scott. Everybody loves Scott. He's an inspirational person, that's for sure. And Aaron, I will follow through, and we'll be connected soon. It's nice to meet you.
Nick Ward, I've unmuted you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, Chris, first of all, thank you very much for talking today. And despite the bruise, I can confirm that everybody should do a triathlon. And if anybody needs any help, I've done many, including on the national stage. So just call me up, I can help. But that wasn't my question. The question is about, I've seen a lot of cross-pollination between civilian industry leadership and military leadership. But I'm curious, having experience in both, what is one big idea from military leadership that you haven't really seen adopted by the private sector?
One thing I've seen from military leadership not adopted by the private sector. Inherently the private sector, I don't mean this to be too gross of an exaggerated response here, but corporate America inherently is about revenue and money, right? And revenue and money is a very corruptible end state, right? What's your desired end state? I want more money. I want to be rich. I want to be wealthy. I want this. I want that. Material, material things aren't the most rewarding thing out there. For some people, it is. But what occurs in corporate America is a mentality of, money inherently, the pursuit of it sometimes creates selfishness, and that selfishness can create silos within a community, whether it's within your own personal department or within the entire company, and people can become territorial and less sharing. And so a difficult transition from a leadership transition that I think I've experienced from the military to corporate America is for senior leaders to stop necessarily holding revenue and money at the ultimate outcome of success, and more so the development of their people and the celebrating of the development of their people in order to create more leaders within your organization that propel you and ultimately derive more revenue out of that. But there's a selfishness I find in corporate America that doesn't exist in the military, mostly because everybody in the military is essentially paid the same and everybody knows exactly what they make, right? Everybody in 01, 02, 03, etc. And so when you're going to work every day, your work is about the effort. Your work is about literally sharpening the spear every single day. Did I make today myself and my individuals from a performance standpoint, when they need to depend on me and I need to depend on them, better at the end of the day? And that's a people leadership focus as a goal. And in corporate America, we lose, here's a good litmus test if you're a leader. Does your spouse know any of your coworkers? You spend so much of your time in corporate America, and if all you're there for is just the check, right, then maybe you're not in the best career path or the best corporation you need to be in.
Right.
But if you're in there because you enjoy what you do and you enjoy your people, then you're going to celebrate them in your personal life as well. And that's a good litmus test. I don't know if I answered your question directly, but if I really had some time to think about it, I'd probably come up with some other good examples.
No, I like it. It sounds a lot like stakeholder theory of management. So I appreciate that.
I hope your eye feels better, buddy. It looks like was that a bike accident?
Yeah. When you're braking, don't go straight from 24 miles per hour to 0. Slower decline.
Yeah.
Steve Johns, I've unmuted you. You might need to unmute.
Well, thank you, Randy. I really appreciate the opportunity to listen to Chris Ford talk. Every time I've heard him talk, I learn more and more words of wisdom. It's just terrific. I wish when I was much younger, I had that much knowledge about how to be a great leader. So I really appreciate you putting Chris in front of all the good folks here. Hey, Chris, I do have a question, but first, I never want to pass up the opportunity to thank you for your service. I know that's a tired phrase, but if you've never been away from family and friends in a hostile environment, it's dirty, it's hot, bullets flying, bombs going off. It's hard to put those things into words, Chris. I can't because I haven't been there. And you never really talked about that. But I know it was there. I know you were a part of that. And I so much appreciate what you've done for our country in that regard. So thank you again.
Thanks, Steve.
Question really is about mentoring. I've had the opportunity to mentor mostly young African-American boys, and that one-on-one contact in a very, where you're vulnerable as well as trying to be a teacher, I've found to be tremendously rewarding. And you mentioned that you were mentored. You received mentoring. Is there a place for mentoring in the business environment where you can have that one-on-one with individuals at every level from time to time, where you are a person as well as a leader? Have you done that? And what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity. I probably wouldn't have even met Randy if it wasn't for you. Secondly, I'm inspired by your book collection behind you. It's a very very, very nice book collection. Maybe someday I'll match it. But you know, mentorship pairs well with making yourself uncomfortable at all times, because putting yourself out there to be a mentor takes a tremendous amount of effort and energy. And, you know, we said earlier, are you an energy giver or an energy taker? It takes a lot of energy to be a leader within your own company, within your own family, within your own neighborhood, community, church, whatever. But to pour into an individual, and when I say pour into them, I mean open yourself up to listen to someone, to understand their strengths, their weaknesses. It takes a lot, and it's a huge responsibility if you're going to choose to become a mentor of somebody. And if you're going to do it, you got to be all in, right? It's not it's a regular calendar repeating calendar event on your schedule to get in front of somebody and really care about an individual in that way. And then it's going to take work, right? It's going to take effort. You got to be invested in what their accomplishments and what they're trying to do in their life, in their personal life as well. So is there a place for it? Absolutely. I think it's important not to just choose willy-nilly. You kind of have to find somebody that you know you have the opportunity to give humble advice, share your own weaknesses, share your own fears, someone that you pair well with. I think mentorship is, you know, sometimes it can be a flat term, you know, go out and mentor somebody. You gotta pair right with somebody, because if you don't have a certain connection, then you might not have the ability to connect and inspire someone. So I definitely think mentorship is there. It's a huge leadership burden in that you got to make sure you're creating the time to pour into someone and develop them from a mentoring standpoint, and pay attention to them. But I would also make sure you're pairing with the right individual. You know, G.D. Dorman was my first battalion commander, and he was only there for a few months. And he called me the only white trash officer in Italy, because everybody else was an academy graduate and I was ROTC. And, you know, some of the things he said, it just kind of flippantly came off, and I never really had a connection with the guy. But when Mike Kershaw showed up, he almost said the same thing. He goes, "Hey, Chris, we did a peer review, and of the 18 lieutenants in the battalion, you're ranked number 18 out of 18. You're my worst ranked lieutenant I got. But if I'm being honest with you, I think you have the opportunity to be the best lieutenant I have. And if you do these things, and if we meet regularly, and you really start treating your career like a career and not a summer job, I think you have the opportunity to be one of the best officers in this man's army." And he could have been blowing complete smoke up my ass. Could have. But what he did do was inspired me. And he paid attention and he checked in on me regularly. Things like that are what mentorship is. The first guy, I think, is where most people potentially could fall in an invaluable mentorship relationship. But when somebody pours into you and they believe in you, and that takes effort, and he had it for days, then that's something that's inspirational. And so I would say that there's definitely room for mentorship. It's just a matter of making sure you pair well, and that it's an inspirational relationship.
Megan, I've unmuted you, but you'll need to unmute as well.
Hey guys, well, one, thank you for letting me crash the party this morning. This is my first go at the coffees on Thursday with y'all, so it was really fun to hear from you. My question is mainly, as you know, a recovering perfectionist and, you know, your friendly neighborhood pessimist. I always try and think of, this is an aspirational concept that I've seen in practice, that I try and practice, but there's always a dark underbelly into any of these like high level kind of ethereal goals that we set for ourselves. And I was wondering, kind of, have you seen this go wrong in real life?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you say pessimist. I always think that people who consider themselves pessimists sometimes are actually just realists, right? A lot of the times. because you already know the outcome before it's going to occur. And then when it occurs, then you're like, did that occur because I knew it, or am I just negative and I'm negative? Anyways, I think most pessimists are actually just realists. So don't be so hard on yourself. You know, where it goes wrong, I think, is when people bite off more than they can chew, right? I'm going to lose, let's take it out of the corporate. Let's say I'm going to lose, 50 pounds over the next 3 months. That's not realistic, right? I'm going to go to work and I'm going to be super, super positive and have the best attitude. And then it comes off artificial and it comes off as not genuine. So if you take it in bite-sized chunks and you say, hey, today I'm just going to go outside and I'm going to go to the track and I'm going to run 1 lap, and then by the end of the week, I hope that 1 lap, I can shave 10 seconds off of it. That's a bite-sized chunk, and that's a realistic first step. From a corporate standpoint, if you're a person that's only generated $100,000 in commission a year, you're not going to go say, I'm going to go be $1 million producer. It's just not going to occur because you don't have the network built out. You don't have the centers of influence. You don't have probably the ability to get referrals because your book isn't that big or whatever. And so where you see it fail, Megan, is when they go too aggressive too early, and then they just they become defeated, and then they just go even deeper into a darker place. And so for most folks, I don't think they understand the time it takes to transform business behavior, attitude, personal behavior. It takes a long, long, long time to create. Behavior is the hardest thing if you're an addict, the rest of your life, you have to choose every single day not to do something, right? Every day, if you love drinking alcohol, you have to fight every day. Is it 4 o'clock yet? Is 3 o'clock acceptable? How about 2 o'clock? People would understand. It's only quarantine, right? Behavior is so hard to change. You have to take it in incremental steps. And then it becomes a habit. And after it becomes a habit, start creating goals around that. And once you have your goals, you start accomplishing tiny goals, then those are those tiny little building blocks of discipline that create a successful person towards whatever that direction you're going. But when it fails big. And it's usually because people go too aggressive too early.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Paul Cohen, and appreciate everybody kind of taking some time.
Paul's my boss, everybody, just so you know.
We're certainly peers, and I get the honor to work with Chris every day. We've worked together for about 13 years, and we just have a blast together. But there's so much that Chris has brought to our company, certainly brought to me as well from a leadership perspective. And I just wanted to not only share, my thoughts and just real quick, Chris is an inspiration to me and so many in our company, just the courage that he's had in his past, and certainly more courage and strength than myself in the services. But there's so many things that he's brought to our company, and he mentioned it earlier, which was peer reviews and performance evaluations that in his military background, he constantly got affirmation of areas that he needs to sustain and areas that we need to improve. And those are things that we've put into motion. We do twice a year doing performance evaluations, doing a self-assessment. We also have 2 peer reviews that are done, and then one-on-one counseling with their unit leaders. And that's something that Chris really brought to us and that we've really tried to embrace, of kind of showing people a path of growth and asking for their feedback. The other thing that I'll share about Chris is his organizational skills that he's really helped bring to our production team. So Chris is our chief sales officer. We've got 23 sales associates in Kansas City, and they kind of all report up to him. But the guidance there has just been, really, really great. And he has helped us develop organization within our calendar. So he will really block out time that, hey, this is when I'm going to do prospecting calls. Tuesday mornings, this is my coffees and breakfast time with clients and prospects, and he will not steer from it. If someone tries to schedule a call or schedule a meeting during that time period, it's just out. And that's something that I've really had to learn is to say no. I feel like there's a lot of executives and different business leaders on this call that we've got to learn to say no sometimes, because that's our blocked time for some specific activity. And Chris won't veer from it. And that's really something I've learned from him, is to organize my schedule and really stick to that. And it helps us be successful. So I just wanted to share some of those things that we learn from Chris every day in corporate America. Love working with Chris. He's a great friend and teammate. So.
Thanks, Paul.
Awesome.
I appreciate that.
Great words, Paul. Appreciate it. Hey, Chris, there are a lot of folks on here who their companies have been negatively impacted by COVID. In some cases, their jobs have been negatively impacted by COVID, or they're exploring their next opportunity. We've got folks like Naomi and Megan on here that are in the early stages of a startup. We've got people looking for businesses to buy. Angela's leading a manufacturing organization during a shutdown with all of those challenges. What were things you learned along the way that you remind yourself to help you persevere when times are tough?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's funny. I just had a peer reach out yesterday and ask me how I'm doing. In sales haven't been great over the last quarter, over the last 2 quarters. And there's that fine line of how much of this is my responsibility, how much of it is others' responsibility, how much of it is environmental or organizational effect, whether it's COVID or whatever. And, you have to understand that every day isn't a victory. Right? Sometimes you're going to lose you might lose a soldier in a fight. You might lose a big deal that you knew you had in the bag. You might lose your company. You got to take a 30,000 foot view in those moments and get a global perspective first and foremost when things are going in a negative direction, and try to understand the entire field of view. How was I affected, and immediately start to apply the lessons learned. What are the sustains and improves of what are occurring right now? For us, from a sales standpoint, why are we not doing so well? Well, quarantine is preventing travel. Travel and face-to-face meetings is where a lot of our producers feel that they get work done. New business opportunities are non-existent because getting in front of someone that you haven't never met before in COVID-19 environment is very, very difficult. And I don't blame other folks for not wanting to accept meetings with people that they've never met before. So of course there's going to be a natural dip in revenue or dip in opportunity or sales. From my perspective, I'm just giving my vignette here. But at the same time, what are the areas that you can sustain? Well, why don't we go back to former clients? People that we lost previously, follow up with them. How's their experience been? Maybe there's a sales opportunity there on a potentially a warm lead versus a cold lead. What about former deals that you didn't get? Not in former clients, but former opportunities. Following up, going back to the well on other opportunities. If you've been a great salesperson, you had a former pipeline just as much as you have a current pipeline. Fall back on that. A lot of our people that are experiencing success when others are experiencing failure is they're falling back on former opportunities. That's just from my lane, my sales lane. From a general business and corporate standpoint, you just got to take a 30,000 foot view and appreciate sometimes that the environment is affecting you in a negative way. You got to take it on the chin, and you just got to be an individual, personal, motivator, self-motivator, and get yourself back up again and start recreating it, reinventing the wheel. I don't have all the answers for sure. But that's a tough question, and I feel for those who are in positions where a non-essential business is being affected and just being absolutely decapitated from a revenue standpoint, I wouldn't even know what to do in those situations. It'd be very difficult.
Hey, Chris, this is Kent. Some of the things you just said were awesome. And I know you can't see it probably from where I'm sitting in the office here, but on the wall back here is, we've got this big sticker. So when you walk out the door, I don't know if you can see it or not, but at any rate, it's on the wall back there. But it says, you miss all the shots you don't take. And that goes, you know, for if you're thinking about your clients that you haven't talked to or everything's tanking because of coronavirus, you know, you got to take all of those shots because you have to if you want to make it work. And you brought that point up several times, and I know Paul mentioned it as well, that you have certain times that are set up and you don't deviate from that. That's perfect. But I just wanted to make that point that, again, if you're not taking the shot, you don't get anywhere.
True words there, Kent. Absolutely. And, you know, so many times folks, they don't realize it, but certain asks or certain opportunities, it takes bravery, right? Going after a whale of an opportunity or whale of an account, going after, you know, a new business, startup, whatever. It takes bravery. And you're right. You know, no risk, no reward. Take all the shots, or you miss every shot you don't take. It's applicable to every industry and every job function for sure. I love that.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for the presentation. I took a lot of notes. It was really, really well presented and a lot of really good information. So I am a mom of 3, and I also have a full-time job working from home. And sometimes, you know, just with all the things that's going on with work, business being slow, family life being tough, it's hard to have that positive energy, you know, and you talked about that sharing that high morale and that positive energy out to your team. I just found it to be more challenging now, especially everyone's working from home. You know, the only time that we get together as a team is when we're in meetings, and usually people are on a tight agenda and jumping from meeting to meetings. So do you have any good tips on how to share that high morale and positive energy to your team during the time when everyone's working from home? So that's my first question. My second question is, one way that I'd like to immerse myself in just the different leadership training, the books, you talked about the books earlier as well, just immerse myself in more knowledge, so, you know, I can stay more positive and then being almost brainwashed with those information. So do you have any more books that, like, if you were to recommend 3 top books, leadership books that you recommend, what will those 3 be?
Sure. How old are your kids, by the way?
I have 9, 8, and 3.
Ooh. You know, I think part of your morale and attitude issue is the fact that there's no light at the end of that tunnel right now. That's the 3-year-old especially. Listen, on day 45 of Ranger School, when you've lost about 30 pounds due to malnourishment and you haven't slept in a day and a half, and it's tough. It's tough to have high morale and a great attitude when you're angry, and being quarantined with the 3 kids, you might be in those dog days right now, right? And that light of that end of tunnel is a little darker than it could be or should be. So first of all, don't get down on having real feelings, right? But when it comes to maintaining morale and attitude, or improving morale and attitude, especially around coworkers, similar to what Megan asked earlier, if you come on too strong too soon, it's going to come off artificial and not genuine, right? So you got to stay within your lane of your own expectations. And attitude, sometimes it's not necessarily pouring out positivity, but just looking through the lens of positivity, right? understanding that what you're receiving, what are the benefits? What are the pros? I understand the cons, I understand the improves, but what's the silver lining component? And as you start to look through things in that lens, the words that come back out that you're reciprocating are going to be in a positive manner. It's not necessarily pom-poms and cheerleading, right? But it's the ability to actually genuinely look at something through the lens of a positive attitude, right? And through the lens of a high morale. How is my response going to affect this person in terms of their morale? I know that I'm going to have to deliver a tough conversation right now. So let me make sure that if I truly appreciate this person and I truly want to develop them, or I truly want to see this person in this particular meeting have a good outcome, let me start with a positive statement about something that they said, or a positive statement about, all you're doing is reflecting back, right? And so now they understand that Angela heard me, she appreciates what I'm talking about, and that alone is a positive, right? It's not necessarily like rah-rah, right? It's just a genuine lens with which to listen and then reflect back. Is positivity and attitude and morale. Leadership books are tough for me to give to people because I enjoy different themes. John Adams, that book is profoundly impactful in terms of, he only helped start America. He created a revolution, blah 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 blah. All of the things, his stick-to-itiveness, his leadership, his ability to speak and communicate and create change, all of that is inspirational. So, John Adams is a book I would highly recommend. When we first merged Kretcher, Heartland, and Power Group, I asked all of the, this is going to be out of left field, and you may hate this book. I'm sure there's a couple people cringing right now. But Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. It's a story about 300 Spartans that went to war. And it is so inspirational to me in terms of how a leader leads. But leading in terms of knowing every detail about the people that they work with. And what that tells me is that they poured into those people to know them and hear them and feel them. But more importantly, some of the vignettes early on in the book about his development and the tough love that he had to go through to become, King Leonidas, who he eventually became. But Gates of Fire, that's candy reading, but it's, I'm not going to put any stereotypes out there, Angela. I hope you like it. A good inspirational book, I'd have to think about another one here. There's a lot. I don't want to miss. Part of trying to be a perfectionist, which I'm not, is I want to give you a great third book here. Let me think about it. When I send this out to Randy, maybe he can actually, Angela, I'll reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Chris, thank you for everything that you've said. And something Drew Meyerowitz and I just kind of have been talking about is the relations of military and sports. And I played sports for a little while. And something that really stuck with me and that I try to go by a lot is the ability to be in uncomfortable situations, kind of like when you said your superior was told you about the shaving thing, coming in to shave, and you're kind of trying to duck and dodge him that morning. And I mean, as and the habits that you've created have kind of led you to, you already kind of know where you stand. If you've done your job, if you've cheated on, picking that donut when nobody's looking. And one thing that my brother and I constantly talk about is a person's success in life can usually be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations or situations that you're willing to have. And once you kind of understand that and be comfortable putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations, that really does help you grow if you're willing to listen and take that advice that your coach or your superior is giving you. So again, I appreciate your words today.
Absolutely. I was a little nervous and intimidated about coming into this morning because took the initiative to watch your YouTube, your Zoom meeting, and I was like, oh, great. I don't know how I'm gonna compare with this guy, but a lot of great feedback by you this morning, because I just watched it this morning, and I appreciate a lot of the words you said.
Yeah. And another thing, if you did look on YouTube, you may have seen my rookie year on Hard Knocks, the HBO series, and how much I got cussed out on that. And I'm sure you probably went through that same thing in the military, maybe at a little bit worse of a situation.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, part of that tough love and those uncomfortable conversations, and something that resonated with me, I wasn't hearing leaders' guidance early because I wasn't accepting. I thought I knew everything I needed to know, which is part of that humility that comes with time. But it wasn't until Colonel Kershaw told me that my biggest character flaw or professional flaw right now is that I'm a college student who went to school 8 months, 9 months out of the year, and then had a summer job. And until I stop treating my career like a summer job that's going to be over in about 90 days, and pour in and understand that the ethos that you bring every day from within is part of your profession, and ultimately will become part of who you are as an individual, only then will you untap your potential, right? And at that point, I started to realize that I'm a professional now. And he's right. I'm not mowing lawns for the next 90 days, right? I'm not sacking groceries. I'm not doing whatever. This is my career, and I'm failing. I'm 18 out of 18 lieutenants. I'm treating this like my summer job. My boss is telling me I'm failing, and I finally heard it. And once you can hear it, and that's what I was talking earlier about mentorship, you got to pair with somebody that you can listen to, because those tough conversations eventually propel you to grow, right? And that's a great point you mentioned earlier regarding the amount of uncomfortable conversations you have. What's funny, though, is that they start to become comfortable. And so you got to continue to put yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah. I wanted to piggyback on that, and you might have already mentioned this, so I apologize if it's redundant, but so I'm a big believer in, you're kind of in the middle, and then you have somebody that's mentoring you, and then you should have somebody that you're kind of mentoring and bringing along in the same way. Where do you go to get filled up, whether that's a person or books or looking online for different things to encourage you to make sure that you are on point?
I do a lot of like Jordan Peterson podcasts. I love listening to Jordan Peterson's take on it's not so much leadership for him. It's more about perspective, the lens with which you see and then reflect. Yeah. I'm a big believer in that. I like to think I'm highly absorbent. I love, Paul Cohen, who just came on here. My peers that I work with, whether it's Josh Hahn or Colby Sullivan or, Jerry Darnaby, Chandler Culler, I like to pull and observe and then reflect what I believe. So just within your own professional circle, you mentioned something in your discussion about the 5 people you surround yourself with, or who you are. And if you continue to put yourself in that environment, and everybody hears that, you all know it, but do you really do that? Same thing with profession and development. You got to be able to pull from those individuals. But, I love whenever, like Joe Rogan podcasts, I don't listen to 90% of it, but when he's got inspirational academics or leaders on there, God, I love listening to those folks. I love listening to, Elon Musk's take on, so many different things, because those people have grown out of paying attention to negativity, and you like to think they're in some nirvana state, where all they are is at this cloud level above everybody, and they're just in pure pontification, and nirvana. But then you learn that no, they hear all the negativity as well. They're affected. No, they're just like you and I. And that a bit of of reality always helps propel me. When I listen to leaders that you put on these pedestals, and when you really get an opportunity to listen to them, they're just like you and I. Anyways, that's some of the things I pay attention to.
Well, this was as awesome as I knew it would be, Chris. I love everything you had to say. A lot of great nuggets here.
Randy, I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate all the kind words from the individuals, but I'm a sum of my parts, and my parts are all of those people that I've stolen from, and who've developed and mentored me along the way. All I am is a reflection of them and their personalities and behaviors. And so while I would like to take some credit, there's zero credit for anything other than all of the people that have been part of my life and development.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the blast from the past. Frank Kearney was my plead boxing coach.
You're kidding.
And literally, I worked with Frank over in Baghdad very early on, before anybody was there. And it's funny how you go back to your plead boxing days, and I literally about wet myself when I saw Frank, and he remembered me. He is just a incredible leader. And as you said, you can't avoid Frank Kearney. Just cannot. It's impossible.
Can't do it.
Thanks for the blast from the past. It was fascinating.
When I first met him, I walked in the brigade commander's office, and I was running an errand for something. And I did not want to go in his office. I wanted nothing to do with it. You know, Colonel Kearney, Lieutenant Ford reporting for whatever reason. And he was literally sitting, you know, back in those days, computer monitors were like even new, right? Nobody had computers. And he was just curling 45-pound dumbbells sitting behind his desk. Lean, mean fighting machine, but brilliant. And I just remember thinking, this guy is an alpha meat eater, and I'm about to get chewed up. And all it was like dropping off a memorandum, you know. But I only knew him as Colonel Francis Kearney. You get the opportunity to say Frank Kearney.
I just, you know, it's amazing. I love listening to you. I learned a ton today. Thanks so much for what you said today. It really was a great reflection and a bunch of things that I took away from it.
Thanks, Drew. That means a lot.
Awesome. Well, I hope all of you have a great weekend and enjoy the summer. And Chris, keep up the great work.
All right, Rainey. Thank you. Take care.